The human was dying. That much was obvious even to me, a Vraxian medical officer with only rudimentary training in xenobiology. Blood, that alarming red fluid, pooled beneath the creature's head, where the metal support beam had punctured clean through its ocular cavity. The rod protruded 6 inches from the socket, glistening with cerebral fluid and fragments of what must have been the human's frontal lobe. "How long has it been like this?" I asked, my voice emitting in the high-frequency squeal my species uses when alarmed. 14 minutes since impact," replied the human medic beside me, oddly calm. "Captain took a bad hit when the cargo shifted during emergency maneuvers." I stared, baffled. 14 minutes. The human should have been dead instantly. Any sentient species I'd encountered would have expired the moment their brain case was compromised. It was a universal constant: damage the central processing unit, and the organism fails. Why did you bring a corpse to my medical bay?" I managed, my 4 appendages gesturing in what my people consider respectful confusion. That's when the corpse spoke. "Hey, Doc, any chance you could maybe stop with the deathbed eulogy and get this damn thing out of my skull? Starting to get a headache." I nearly evacuated my respiratory chambers in shock. The human, this captain with a metal rod piercing what should be critical areas of cognitive function, was talking. Not only talking, but forming coherent sentences, making jokes, even. "Impossible," I whispered, but the word felt hollow against the evidence before me. "Nah, just really inconvenient," the human replied, his single functioning eye focusing on me with unnerving clarity. Worst part is, this was my good eye. Gonna need to requisition a replacement. I scanned the human's body again, noticing details I'd missed in my initial shock. The left leg below the knee wasn't organic. It was a mechanical prosthetic, integrated seamlessly with the biological tissue. Scarring along the spine suggested previous invasive procedure. This wasn't the first major trauma this organism had experienced. You've survived severe injuries before?" I asked, my professional detachment beginning to crumble. 3 tours in the Centauri conflict," the human captain responded, wincing as he tried to nod and was reminded of the foreign object in his skull. "Lost the leg to an antimatter mine. Spine was reconstructed after a grav shield failure. The usual stuff." "The usual stuff?" Nothing about this was usual. In my 17 cycles as a medical practitioner, I had never witnessed anything remotely approaching this level of durability. "How are you conscious?" I couldn't help but ask. "The penetrating object has damaged your cerebral mass. By all medical understanding, you should be..." "Dead?" the human finished for me. "Yeah, we get that a lot. Brain's pretty resilient, actually. Got redundant systems for the important bits. Rest can be patched up or re-roted." His human crewmates nodded as if this were common knowledge, not an earth-shattering revelation about their species and unnatural resilience. I moved closer, professional curiosity overtaking my horror. "May I gestured to his wound. "Knock yourself out, Doc. Just try not to wiggle it too much." Like I said, headache. My scanning apparatus revealed something astounding. The human brain was already responding to the trauma. Neural pathways rerouting, inflammation controlled, shock minimized. The organ was adapting, in real time, to catastrophic injury. "Your species can survive brain trauma," I stated, not quite believing my own words. "Within reason," the captain clarified. "I mean, we're not immortal, but the brain's pretty good at working around damage. Neural plasticity, they call it. Neural plasticity. A simple term for what appeared to be nothing short of evolutionary magic." The medic stepped forward. "Look, we need to get this stabilized properly. Our ship doesn't have the equipment. Can you help or not?" I realized I'd been floating motionless for several moments, lost in a fog of contradicting data and collapsing assumptions. Everything I understood about sentient physiology, everything I had been taught about the fundamental vulnerabilities of complex neural systems, was being challenged by this bleeding, joking, impossibly alive human. "Yes," I found myself saying. "Yes, I can help." As I prepared the emergency suite for what would be the most unusual procedure of my career, I could not shake the feeling that I stood at the precipice of a profound discovery. These humans, these soft-skinned, structurally fragile bipeds that we had dismissed as easy prey in the expansion wars, they possessed capabilities we had never imagined. The human captain caught my gaze, his single eye somehow seeming to read my thoughts. "First time working on a human?" he asked. Yes, I admitted. He smiled, an expression I would later learn indicated amusement rather than aggression, despite the alarming display of teeth. Well, Doc, he said, blood still dripping down his face, I have a feeling this is going to be educational for both of us. I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. 6 standard cycles had passed since the incident with the metal rod and the impossible human. 6 cycles since Captain James Morgan had looked at me with one functioning eye, blood streaming down his face, and asked if I would accompany the UNC Dauntless as their medical officer. Consider it a cultural exchange, he'd said, his newly implanted synthetic eye whirring as it calibrated. You're curious about us. We could use someone with your expertise. My superiors had practically fallen over themselves approving my request. The Vraxian Medical Assembly had never had the opportunity to study humans up close for extended periods. What I hadn't told them was that I wasn't going as a detached observer, I was going as the ship's doctor. The first real emergency came 3 weeks into our journey through the Cygnus Expanse. We'd taken fire from raiders, and the resulting hull breach had exposed an entire section to vacuum. By the time we sealed it off, 5 crew members had been exposed for nearly 2 minutes. In Vraxian physiology, even 15 seconds of vacuum exposure results in catastrophic system failure. Our cells rupture, our respiratory chambers explode, our neural fluid boils. Death is instantaneous and frankly merciful. I arrived at the medical bay expecting to perform last rites. Instead, I found 5 humans receiving emergency oxygen, their skin mottled with burst blood vessels but otherwise alive. How? I asked the assistant medic, a stocky human named Thompson. Vacuum exposure? Yeah, it's nasty, but humans can survive about 90 seconds without permanent damage. These guys pushed it to nearly 2 minutes, so they'll need some tissue regeneration and lung therapy, but they'll be fine. Fine? I echoed, the word hollow in my mouth. Their bodies were exposed to the void of space. Thompson shrugged. That casual human gesture of dismissal that still unnerved me. Human body doesn't instantly explode in vacuum. That's just vids. Water doesn't really boil in your blood either. Our skin's too tight for that. Biggest problems are oxygen deprivation and radiation. Honest. I stared at the 5 patients, all conscious, all visibly in pain but undeniably alive after an experience that would have left any Vraxian as nothing more than a splatter of frozen cellular matter. When I reported this to the Vraxian Medical Assembly, their response was immediate. Further study, essential. Prolonged exposure to human biological resilience could be key to military applications. That single communication revealed the true purpose of my cultural exchange. I wasn't here to learn. I was here to weaponize. The realization sat heavy in my 4 hearts. These humans who had welcomed me aboard their vessel were not subjects to be dissected for military advantage. They were, well, I wasn't sure what they were yet, but they deserved better than to be reduced to their genetic advantages. I deleted the communication. It would be the first of many acts that would slowly sever my connection to my own kind. The true test of my changing allegiance came during the mining operation on Proxima 6. A barren rock with atmosphere so toxic it could melt Vraxian exoskeletons on contact, yet apparently just uncomfortable enough for humans to tolerate with minimal protective gear. You're going down there? I asked Captain Morgan incredulously, as he suited up in what appeared to be woefully inadequate protection. The atmospheric composition is 37% sulfuric compounds. The radiation levels alone would kill most species. Yeah, he finished for me, checking the seal on his gloves. We've got radiation meds that'll keep us functioning. As for the atmosphere, that's what the filters are for. He tapped his lightweight mask. Captain, with respect, my species would consider this suicide. Morgan grinned, his synthetic eye gleaming. That's why we're doing the job and not your species, Doc. No offense. I insisted on joining the expedition, against every survival instinct I possessed. My environmental suit was 3 times as thick as theirs, with 7 redundant systems. I looked like a bloated gas bag next to their sleek, functional forms. On the surface, the horror of Proxima 6 became immediately apparent. The ground itself seemed hostile, cracked and venting poisonous gases. The sky boiled with acidic clouds. A Vraxian would last perhaps 10 minutes in a top-grade environmental suit before systemic failure. Yet the humans worked for hours, mining the precious xenorite deposits, when a sudden geyser of corrosive gas breached Williams's suit. I was certain I was about to witness my first human death. The acid ate through his arm protection, exposing skin that immediately blistered and charred. Williams cursed, a human vocal expression of pain and frustration, but continued working one-handed while Thompson applied a spray-on sealant directly to his wounded flesh. "Shouldn't he return to the ship?" I asked, my voice trembling even through the comm system. "For this?" Williams held up his damaged arm, now covered in a hardening foam. "It's just a chemical burn. I've had worse cooking breakfast." That night, in the medical bay, I examined Williams' injury. The acid had eaten nearly to the bone, yet he'd continued working for 4 more hours. The human pain threshold wasn't just high, it was adaptable. They could simply decide how much pain mattered. "Mind over matter," Williams explained, as I applied regenerative gel to his wound. "You compartmentalize, put the pain in a box, deal with it later." "That's not physiologically possible," I insisted. Williams laughed. "Tell that to my arm." I was beginning to understand why my superiors wanted to weaponize human genetics. These creatures could endure what no rational species would even attempt. They didn't just survive hostile environments, they conquered them through sheer stubborn refusal to succumb. 3 months into our journey, I was called to the cargo bay for another emergency. This time, it was different. A storage unit had collapsed, trapping Rodriguez beneath tons of metal. By the time they extracted him, his lower body was crushed beyond recognition. Even humans had limits. Or so I thought. "Get me the trauma kit," ordered Thompson, cutting away Rodriguez's shredded uniform. "He's gone," I said softly, my medical scanner showing catastrophic damage to most major organs. "He's in hypovolemic shock, but his brain's still active," Thompson corrected. "We can stabilize him." What followed was a 12-hour surgery that defied everything I understood about medicine. They replaced entire vascular sections with synthetic tubing. They removed organs that couldn't be saved. They operated while Rodriguez was partially conscious, his system too fragile for complete anesthesia, and the human endured it. He screamed. Yes, he suffered in ways that made my very essence recoil, but he survived. "How?" I asked Morgan later, as we watched Rodriguez floating in the regen tank, his body more mishing now than flesh. "How do you endure such suffering?" Morgan was quiet for a long moment. "We evolved on a planet that was constantly trying to kill us. Predators, diseases, natural disasters. Earth was not a gentle cradle. The ones who survived were the ones who could take a hit and keep going." "But the pain." "Pain is information," Morgan said simply. "It tells you something's wrong, but information can be processed, filtered, sometimes even ignored if necessary." I realized then that I had been approaching this all wrong. Humans weren't simply durable in the physical sense. Their true resilience was cognitive. They had evolved not just bodies that could withstand trauma, but minds that could contextualize suffering itself. When I tried to explain this revelation to my superiors, I received no response. Further inquiries revealed my access to Vraxian networks had been severed. The official designation attached to my credentials, potential cognitive contamination. I had been abandoned by my own species for the crime of understanding humans too well. The final test came in the methane seas of Europa 9. We'd responded to a distress signal from a research station gone dark. The facility, built on stilts above the liquid methane ocean, had suffered catastrophic structural failure. The rescue team consisted of Morgan, Thompson, Davis, and myself. The moment we stepped from the shuttle, I knew something was wrong. The platform beneath our feet groaned with imminent collapse. "We've got minutes, not hours," Morgan shouted over the howling wind. "Split up. Find survivors." I had grown somewhat accustomed to human recklessness by now, but this bordered on madness. The entire structure was compromised, creaking with each gust of wind, methane spray freezing instantly on contact with our suits. I found 2 human researchers alive but trapped behind a pressure door. As I worked to override the locking mechanism, the platform gave another sickening lurch. "Captain," I called through the comm, "this section is going to collapse. We need immediate evacuation." "Working on it, Doc," came his strained reply. "Got 3 more survivors. Davis is down. Thompson's bringing him back to the shuttle." "How many on your end?" "2, I replied, "but we won't make it to the extraction point. The connecting bridge has collapsed." There was a pause. "Then I'm coming to you." Negative, Captain. The structural integrity is crap. Yeah, I noticed. Hold position. 15 excruciating minutes later, Morgan appeared through the methane fog, carrying what looked like coils of rope. We're going to have to go around, he explained, securing one end of the line to a relatively datable support beam, outside edge of the platform. It'll hold if we're fast. It most certainly will not hold, I argued. The tensile stress on those beams is already beyond tolerance. Morgan secured the rope around his waist, then handed me the other end. Only one way to find out. What followed was the most terrifying experience of my existence. The narrow maintenance walkway along the platform's edge barely supported our weight. The methane sea below us was cold enough to freeze my specialized suit on contact. One slip meant certain death. We were halfway across, the researchers behind me and Morgan in front, when the inevitable happened. With a sound like a gunshot, the walkway broke away from the main structure. I felt myself falling, the rope around my midsection going taut as Morgan somehow maintained his grip on the remaining structure. The two researchers dangled below me, their added weight threatening to pull us all into the methane sea. "Let us go," one of them shouted. "The rope won't hold four." He was right. The mathematics were simple. The rope's tensile strength, multiplied by Morgan's rapidly weakening grip, divided by our combined mass, we had perhaps seconds. Then Morgan did something I still struggle to comprehend. Instead of trying to pull us up, an impossible task, he let go of his secure position and pushed off, swinging us like a pendulum toward a lower platform that remained partially intact. "Grab it as you swing by," he ordered through gritted teeth. The researchers caught the edge. I didn't. My limbs, evolved for precision and dexterity rather than strength, couldn't maintain a grip on the icy metal. I slipped. Morgan caught me with his free arm, the synthetic muscles in his shoulders straining against fabric and flesh. "I've got you, Doc," he grunted, though I could see the fabric of his suit tearing where it connected to his cybernetic shoulder. The cold was affecting his prosthetics. We were both going to fall. "Let me go, Captain," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. "It's the only logic—" "Shut up," he interrupted. "That's an order." With a roar that seemed to come from some primal human depth, Morgan swung us toward another outcropping. This time, I managed to wrap two of my limbs around a support strut, but as I secured myself, I watched in horror as the motion tore Morgan's synthetic arm from its housing, the connections shredding in a spray of fluid and sparks. He fell. I caught him with my lower limbs, but the impact dislocated two of my joint capsules. Pain flooded my nervous system, threatening to overwhelm my consciousness. My grip on the frozen metal began to slip. In that moment, I understood, with perfect clarity, I was going to die here, on this frozen moon, with this impossible human. My species had abandoned me, his had accepted me, and now, in trying to save these frail, resilient creatures, I would share their fate. As my grip finally gave way, I felt an odd sense of peace. Perhaps this too was something I had learned from humans, how to face death without surrendering to despair. We fell together into the freezing methane fog, the research platform disappearing above us. My brain registered the impact with the methane sea as a single moment of impossible cold, then nothing. When consciousness returned, I was certain I had transcended to whatever afterlife Raxians believe in, a realm of pure energy and thought, free from the limitations of physical form. The fact that this afterlife looks suspiciously like the UNC Dauntless's medical bay was disorienting. "He's coming around," said a voice I recognized as Thompson's. "Vital signs, stabilizing." I tried to move my upper appendages and found them unresponsive. Panic flared briefly until I realized I could still feel them. They were immobilized, not amputated. "Easy there, Doc," came another familiar voice. Captain Morgan leaned into my field of vision, very much alive and sporting a new synthetic arm even more advanced than his previous model. "You've been out for 9 days. Had us worried." "How?" The question emerged as little more than a rasp from my primary speech organ. "How are we alive? That's a fun story." Morgan pulled up a chair, his synthetic eye whirring as it focused. "Turns out the team back on the Dauntless was tracking our vitals. When we fell, they deployed the emergency retrieval drones, grabbed us about 30 meters down. Another few seconds and the methane would have frozen us solid." This explanation was plausible yet wholly unsatisfying. Emergency retrieval drones with that level of precision didn't exist in any technology catalog I'd studied, and even if they had been deployed, the temperatures of the methane sea should have shut down both our biological systems before any rescue could occur. "Your arm," I managed. Morgan flexed his new appendage. "Latest model. Been waiting for an excuse to upgrade. Honestly, something wasn't adding up." The casual way he discussed replacing a limb, as if it were a simple uniform change. The impossible rescue, the fact that I was alive at all without a specialized pressure chamber to recover from methane exposure. "You're confused," Morgan said, reading my expression with unnerving accuracy. "That's fair. I haven't been entirely forthcoming about a few things." He nodded to Thompson, who activated what appeared to be a privacy field around my medical pod. "What I'm about to tell you isn't common knowledge even among my own crew," Morgan began, his tone shifting to something more formal, more official. "I'm not just a freighter captain. The UNC Dauntless isn't just a commercial vessel." I had suspected as much. The ship's capabilities had always seemed beyond its alleged purpose. We're part of Project Prometheus, a multi-generational human initiative dedicated to studying and understanding sentient species across the galaxy. "Your intelligence gatherers?" The concept translated poorly into Vraxian, a species with no cultural concept of espionage. Morgan smiled. "Scientists would be more accurate. Anthropologists, xenobiologists, cultural interpreters. For the past 80 years, human researchers have been embedding themselves in various sectors, learning about different species, not just their biology, but their societies, their potential. Their weaknesses," I added, a cold realization settling into my 4 hearts. "No," Morgan said firmly. "Their strengths, what makes each species uniquely valuable. The Arcturians' temporal perception, the Helix Collective's distributed consciousness, the Vrel's photosynthetic computing, and Vraxians?" I asked, trying to imagine what value my species, known primarily for our medical expertise and risk aversion, could offer. "Your species possesses something extraordinary," Morgan said. "Something we recognized from our earliest encounters." He touched a control panel, and a holographic display appeared above us. It showed a complex neural map that I recognized as Vraxian, specifically our distributed cognitive network. 4 independent brain hemispheres, capable of simultaneous parallel processing, Morgan explained, each able to function autonomously while still maintaining perfect synchronization with the others. "Standard Vraxian physiology," I said, not understanding his fascination. "It's anything but standard. Your species evolved the biological equivalent of a quantum computer. You can process multiple complex problems simultaneously without loss of efficiency. It's an adaptation we've never seen anywhere else in the galaxy." I had never considered our cognitive structure remarkable. It was simply how we functioned. "That night, in the medical bay, when you performed emergency surgery on me," Morgan continued, "you were monitoring 16 different biological systems, calculating medication dosages, and directing 3 surgical assistants, all while maintaining a running diagnostic on my synthetic eye. No human could do that. So you've been studying me." The thought was uncomfortable, though I realized it was no different from what I had been doing to them. "Learning from you," Morgan corrected, "just as we hoped you were learning from us." A suspicion formed in my mind. "The rod through your ocular cavity, was that staged?" Morgan laughed. "Hell no. That hurt like a—" He caught himself. "No, that was a genuine accident. But it did accelerate our timeline for bringing a Vraxian medical officer aboard." My mind raced through implications. "My superiors, their interest in human resilience. They're not the only ones with agendas," Morgan said quietly. "There's a reason I chose to tell you this now." He adjusted the holographic display. A new image appeared, a star map showing an approaching anomaly at the edge of charted space. 3 months ago, we lost contact with our research outpost in the Antares sector. Last transmission mentioned void entities consuming entire planetary systems. 2 weeks ago, we lost another outpost in Tau Ceti. Whatever's coming doesn't communicate, doesn't negotiate, and doesn't leave survivors. The implications were staggering. "You need allies. We need partners," Morgan corrected. "Species who complement our strengths, who can do what we cannot. The Acaririans can perceive time differently, giving us tactical advantage. The Helix can process vast amounts of distributed data. The Vrel can harness stellar energy directly. And Vraxians? I asked again. Your cognitive multitasking could coordinate the entire resistance, with 4 minds working in perfect harmony, each handling different aspects of an impossible problem. While humans endure, I finished for him, you absorb punishment that would destroy other species. You adapt to injuries, environments, situations that should be fatal. We call it the cockroach factor, Morgan said with a wry smile. Not pretty, but effective. We're really, really hard to kill. As a species, I mean. Individuals die plenty. The truth hit me with surprising force. What I had perceived as recklessness, their willingness to enter hostile environments, to endure injuries, to push beyond rational limits, wasn't weakness at all. It was evolutionary strategy. Humans had survived because they could endure punishment that would eradicate more advanced species. Your physical vulnerability forced you to develop mental resilience, I said, understanding dawning. Your capacity for suffering became your greatest strength. Morgan nodded. Pain is information. Failure is education. Every time we break, we rebuild stronger. I thought of Rodriguez in the regen tank. More machine than flesh, yet somehow still essentially human. Of Williams continuing to work with his arm dissolving in acid. Of humans surviving vacuum exposure through sheer biological stubbornness. My people would never understand this, I said. We evolved to avoid damage at all costs. Our entire social structure revolves around risk mitigation. Which is why we need you, Morgan said. You see the dangers we might rush into blindly. We have the blueprint for a coalition, Doc, an alliance of species, each contributing what the others lack. But we need someone who can speak to both worlds. With sudden clarity, I understood why I had been allowed to observe so much, to become so integrated into their crew. They hadn't just been studying me. They had been auditioning me. You want me to be an ambassador? I said. We want you to be the first, Morgan corrected. The bridge between humans and Vraxians proved that different evolutionary strategies can complement each other instead of competing. The privacy field around my pod flickered, then dissolved completely. Beyond it stood not just the medical team, but the entire bridge crew of the Dauntless. Among them were faces I didn't recognize, and not all of them were human. An Arcturian navigator, her temporal glands pulsing with iridescent light. A Helix Collective representative, its 3 bodies moving in synchrony. A Vrelel engineer, photosynthetic organs absorbing the medbay's lights. Meet the real crew of the Dauntless, Morgan said, or at least the command staff. One by one they approached, each offering the traditional greeting of their species. The Arcturian touched her temporal gland to my upper appendage, sharing a brief glimpse of possible futures, most dark, but some glimmering with potential. The Helix representative synchronized briefly with my neural pattern, a disorienting but exhilarating moment of shared consciousness. The Vrel simply pulsed with approval, shifting through spectrums only partially visible to my optical organs. I don't understand, I said, overwhelmed. You've already built this coalition. Why do you need me? Morgan's expression grew serious. Because it's not enough. The void entities have consumed 12 star systems in the past year. They're accelerating, and they're heading toward Vraxian space next. A cold dread settled over me. My people have no defenses against such a threat. We're researchers, healers, coordinators, not warriors. Exactly, said Morgan, which is why you need us as much as we need you. With that simple statement, everything I had believed about the power dynamics between our species inverted. Humans weren't reckless primitives lacking proper evolutionary safeguards. They were the frontline defenders that more specialized species desperately needed, the biological equivalent of a shield wall. And my people, for all our advanced cognitive capabilities, were utterly vulnerable without that protection. The Vraxian High Council has refused all diplomatic overtures, Morgan continued. They believe humans are unpredictable, dangerous, a contaminant to be studied from a safe distance, not allies to be embraced. They're not wrong about the dangerous part, I said. Morgan smiled. No, they're not, but sometimes you need dangerous on your side. I thought of all I had witnessed aboard the Dauntless. Humans pushing beyond what should be biologically possible, adapting to environments that should be lethal, surviving injuries that would instantly kill any Vraxian. I had assumed these traits made them primitive, less evolved. I had never been more wrong. What do you need me to do? I asked, decision already made. 3 standard cycles later, I stood before the Vraxian High Council, my neural implant transmitting the entire proceeding to the Dauntless in orbit above. I wore the modified uniform of a Prometheus Project Liaison Officer, the first Vraxian ever to hold such a position. You ask us to believe that these beings, these humans who routinely expose themselves to lethal environments, who replace body parts as casually as we would replace damaged equipment, who seem to actively seek out suffering, are necessary for our survival. The High Counselor's tone made her skepticism clear. I do not ask you to believe, I replied, activating the data crystal Morgan had given me. I ask you to observe. The holographic display activated, showing the remnants of Tau Ceti, a once thriving star system, now reduced to cosmic dust and void. The recording continued, showing the progression of destruction across multiple systems, the pattern unmistakable. This threat will reach Vraxian space within 6 standard cycles, I continued. It does not communicate, it does not negotiate, it consumes all matter, all energy, all life in its path, and these humans propose to stop it. How exactly? Asked another counselor. Not humans alone, I clarified. A coalition of species, each contributing unique evolutionary advantages. The Arcturians' temporal perception, the Helix's distributed processing, the Vrel's energy manipulation, and our cognitive, multitasking capacity. And what do the humans contribute to this coalition? The High Counselor's tone remained dismissive. I paused, searching for the words that might bridge the vast conceptual divide between our species. Humans contribute what we cannot, I said finally. The ability to endure, to continue functioning under conditions that would destroy us, to adapt to environments that should be lethal, to survive injuries that would be fatal, to face extinction-level threats and refuse to yield. I thought of Captain Morgan, who had survived a metal rod through his brain and joked about it afterward. Of Rodriguez, rebuilding himself after injuries that should have been unsurvivable. Of Williams, who treated acid burns as mere inconveniences. What humans call pain, we call death, I continued. What they call adaptation, we call impossibility. They have evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill them, and in response they developed not just the physical capacity to endure suffering, but the mental framework to contextualize it, to learn from it, to grow stronger because of it. The council chambers had grown utterly silent. The void entities cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be studied from a safe distance. They cannot be defeated through caution. What is required now is something Vraxians have never needed to develop, the capacity to endure catastrophic damage and continue functioning. I gestured to the holographic display, now showing the UNC Dauntless and its coalition fleet. Humans call themselves the Shield Wall, the first and last line of defense. They do not ask us to become what they are. They ask only that we contribute what we already possess, our unique cognitive architecture to a shared survival strategy. The silence stretched on as the council members communicated through their neural network. I waited, knowing that my words alone would not be enough. They would need to process, to analyze, to debate. Finally, the High Counselor spoke. Your neural patterns have been fundamentally altered by prolonged exposure to these beings. You are no longer purely Vraxian in your thought processes. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I am more than I was, I acknowledged. As are they, through their association with me. That is the point of coalition, not to remain static, but to evolve through mutual exchange. Another long silence. Then, we will receive this human representative, this Captain Morgan. We will hear their proposal directly. It wasn't acceptance, not yet, but it was a beginning. As I left the council chambers, I received a transmission from the Dauntless. Well done, Doc, came Morgan's voice, Phase 1 complete. They haven't agreed to anything yet, I cautioned. They're talking. That's more than we had yesterday. A pause then. New intelligence just came in. The void entities have accelerated again. Timelines compressed. I felt my 4 hearts constrict simultaneously. How compressed? 3 cycles, not 6. We need to move faster. I thought of what Morgan had taught me about human adaptability, their capacity to adjust to changing circumstances, to absorb new information and reformulate strategy without hesitation. Then, we will move faster, I said, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. I've uploaded everything we know about Vraxian cognitive architecture to the Coalition database. Your engineers can begin designing the neural interface while I convince the Council. You sound almost human, Morgan said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. And you think like a Vraxian, I replied. Perhaps that's the point. As I stepped into the transport that would take me back to the Dauntless, I caught a glimpse of the night sky above the Vraxian capital. Somewhere out there the void approached, implacable, unstoppable by any single species. But we were no longer single species. We were becoming something new, something unprecedented, a coalition of complementary strengths, each compensating for the other's vulnerabilities. Humans had taught me that what looks like weakness from one perspective might be extraordinary strength from another, that suffering itself could be transformed into resilience. And now, they would teach my people the same lesson, assuming, of course, that the universe gave us enough time. I glanced once more at the stars, wondering which would be the first to vanish when the void arrived. They won't take our worlds, I whispered, surprising myself with the fierce protectiveness in my voice, an emotion no pure Vraxian would ever express. Perhaps I truly was becoming something new, something neither fully Vraxian nor human, but a bridge between worlds. And perhaps that bridge was exactly what the galaxy needed to survive.